Dr. Faragher, I hope you can hear me.
Indeed, Tristan.
So yes, thank you very much for being here with us, and I think it's quite a privilege to be able to talk to you. But what I'm quite interested in is I've seen, as we know, science is quite grounded in mathematics, and I recall from my grade 11 or matric science class how that the teacher would arrange us from best mark to worst mark in seating order to show us what we would be up against when we go to university. And I saw one student who would always find themselves at the bottom of the seating arrangement, and eventually they no longer took science. And I'm quite curious to hear your opinion on that regarding what sort of emotional state do you think these people generally find themselves in when they feel as though they no longer can do mathematics or science, for instance, and how do you prevent that? How do you keep them motivated to keep trying?
Yeah, you know, I had exactly the same thing when I was in year 11 and 12. We were seated like that. And I was the one who was near the front because all the, you know, the best, the top marks were at the back row and it sort of cycled all the way around, you know, and there has to be someone at the bottom. You know, you still might be doing all right. But as soon as you're there, it's a very obvious indication that you're not as good as the other people. And this has been a very well studied area of mathematics psychology, and the self-fulfilling prophecy pours into this, and your beliefs about yourself as a learner and the beliefs that others hold about you as a learner are very powerful. And we think about in medicine that placebo effect is so strong that to test any drug, they have to blind it, not only from the person receiving it, but the person giving it. And if you think that can affect the body in terms of whatever the drug is doing, that's a physical thing. How much more is it going to be when we're dealing with emotions and psychology, and that's absolutely what's been found. And so you're absolutely on the money. So what do? Well, we certainly don't see kids in that way. And we also need, I suppose, to constantly be thinking about not comparing people, because we really want to be aiming towards achievement of learning outcomes. So for an individual, what's the next step? What are you going to be moving on to next, and what's the good in what you're already doing? So the other thing I think is helpful is to use the placebo effect in reverse. So you hold a belief about all learners that they can learn, and that's a really powerful thing. But then you also tell them, and you can mess with their minds. It's fabulous working with kids because you can say things like, "You're the best class I've ever taught," and you're just amazing. And you know, it is one of those things that you can see it really happening over the time that you have them. So. Yeah.
If I may, how far can you push that though? If somebody is so firmly set in their belief that they cannot do mathematics, how far can you push them down the road to coming back to it?
Yeah. There's a really lovely book called The Myth of Ability, and by John Mighton. And he began with teaching kids who'd been kids in prisons and all sorts of places, and really had very poor opinions of themselves as learners. And some of them told him, you know, they'd got Fs on their papers since they were in preschool. And he started with fractions, and he very carefully structured how he taught them fractions, breaking it down, very small steps, so they couldn't possibly fail. And they were achieving these things. And the reason he said he started with fractions is because they all expected they wouldn't be able to do it. And algebra is another one, that people just expect they're not going to be able to do it. And then when they actually can, their delight in their own achievement is what takes them further. And so who knows where the boundaries lie? You know, really, we just don't know unless we try. And I guess it's that personal relationship with students, knowing them well and really believing in them and never giving up.
That's absolutely fantastic. And to be in all honesty, I would love to see more people doing mainstream mathematics and stuff and believing in themselves. So thank you for answering my questions. And I'll leave it to the floor to the next couple of questions.
Thanks, Tristan.
Thanks, Tristan, for that question. You know, Prof, yesterday or the day before, Sean and I were talking about this very thing, and I was telling him about the modality that I use in psychology, which is called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's based on the premise that our thoughts and our meanings that we create, you know, it influences how we respond to situations. So when we're sitting with math, and if there's a difficulty with completing the task, it's not necessarily the task that is difficult that is creating that negative perception towards, but the meaning that I make in that moment that I can't do this, that I'm not good at this, that I'm not good enough to complete this task, and so that's in CBT. That's where we address those thoughts that we create, those meanings that we have. But I mean, this discussion is just getting more and more interesting, and I really hope that we can do some kind of a follow-up. Sean and Sophie, I hope you guys are listening.